Good evening, everyone. Michael Devine here for another installment of Gray Matters Radio. I'm your host, Michael Devine. This is the Armchair Quarterback, William Reed.
How's it going, Mike?
I am doing good, man. How you doing?
Just enjoying the holiday season, getting in the mood, all that good stuff. How about you?
You know what? I think I'm doing all right. I'm a little under the weather today. I'm not going to lie. I'm drinking water. I feel like I'm...
No, wait. Are you under the weather or are you hungover? Because I believe there might be a difference.
Well, is it a hangover if it's been a couple days since you drank? So I think that's my dilemma. I don't necessarily think it's a hangover. If you follow us on social media, you would see that Mike was in bourbon country all weekend, and so I think I may have overdid it a little bit.
Was that Sheboygan?
Yes, the bourbon trails in Sheboygan. It's beautiful this time of year. In case it's stunning. In case you haven't really ever been there, but yeah. So I'm a little under weather today, but I'm feeling good, but just not my normal self where I'm drinking on the air. So I'm watering it up today. So
well, maybe I'll have a beer in your honor for you.
Hey, somebody has to drink on this show.
Well, that's what someone's going to pick up the slack. I've been slacking the last couple episodes here, not drinking. So I know you drink the bourbon, so maybe I'll have a beer or two. We'll see.
Well, I feel kind of bad because I'm always advocating, as a clinician, yeah, take care of yourself. Don't do this. I'm drink, drink plenty. I'm maybe I'm sending mixed messages here. I don't know.
Well, luckily this episode, I think you and I are more in agreement on the topic and things like that, as opposed to last episode when we got a little bit more heated than normal between us. So we'll see how it goes. So maybe the alcohol might not be needed after all. We'll see.
Well, I mean, the whole point of the show, I mean, it's okay to disagree. It's a cool part of the show. I think we model how do you disagree and still be friends at the end.
Well, we did have probably a good 5 or 10 minutes. They got off a topic last week that was, I believe, was edited out because it was so far off topic. And I don't know how exactly we got there, but lo and behold, shocker, it had to do with President
the orange
Trump.
Myth. The orange myth. Yeah, he does it every single time.
The Trumpster. Driving a wedge through friendships, at least for 5 or 10 minutes.
I would argue you're the one that was in more rare form. I was just kind of rolling with it, but it's okay. It's okay.
I just like to play devil's advocate sometimes. I mean, I don't always agree 100%. Sometimes I do, but I just kind of say, well, what if this, and maybe it's that, and could it possibly be this, and it doesn't mean I necessarily always believe it. I just kind of try to see both sides.
It's okay. You believe in magic, Bill. It's cool. I dig it. I love you for it. I really, really do. But in more realistic thinking, all right. So I'm gonna pick a different thing to be angry at this week. So apparently, my common theme has been social media. I've been trying to stay away from it, but apparently in the podcasting world, you're supposed to go on social media and actually, use Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And so it's interesting. You can get your show out and your opinions out to more people than ever before. There's a drawback, though. There's a lot of really, really stupid people out there. I love you guys for listening to the show. It's kind of weird that you guys are listening to the show and calling me an idiot, but really, aren't they the idiots for listening to an idiot?
No, people like to be offended and outraged, and it's like we've talked about before. What was the old Howard Stern thing? Remember the movie? The average Howard Stern hater listened for 3 hours every day, and they're like, well, if they hate him, why do they listen? Answer most commonly given, I want to see what he'll say next.
Exactly.
People will. I was talking to a good friend of ours, Hutch, and just yesterday, and he's very anti-Trump, very liberal, and very anti-Fox News, which is his prerogative. But he was telling me how, well, I was just watching Fox News the other day, and this person said this, and another time I was watching Fox News the other day, and this person said that, and I'm thinking, that's cool, but why the hell?
Why are you watching Fox News if you hate it so bad?
I just think, and it's not a knock on him or anybody that does that, but I think that's just kind of in our nature. I'm guilty of it too. I'm sure you are, and everyone tuning into this program is at some point is guilty of watching something you hate just so you can even if it makes your blood boil. It's just because you're like, I hate it. Let me see what's next. Let me turn the volume up, because that's just. Sometimes that's the way we are. So sometimes that's fun to do too. Sometimes it's probably not really healthy for us, but
it's definitely not very healthy for us. But we're gonna roll with it.
There's drinking and smoking and staying out late and doing all this. But us humans, we still kind of tend to do that sometimes anyway. So
But we're out here fighting the battle. And what I look at, and it really came to me just this week in my little what the fuck segment, right? What really came to me is that what we're battling for is reason and rational thinking. The thing that's it's been really bothering me lately is when I try arguing a fact. I mean, I think even though I make no, I'm obviously biased in some directions, right? I really do my best to like talk about evidence, facts, and I've been trying to do that. It's what we call dialectical discussions. On dialectical discussions is simply instead of it being I'm right, you're wrong, and all the reasons why I'm right and you're wrong. It's more simply, hey, what do you believe, and what do you believe? Why do you believe that? And then hopefully, if you do your job and you listen to them, they're going to listen to you. And once again, same model, right? And so I've been trying to get an understanding of what people believe and why. And what I'm very quickly finding out is that people don't even really have any basis for their beliefs. It's not about science. It's not about data. It's not even about cause and effect. They will sit there and like one of the ones that we were talking about was the someone got me on for like a free college for everyone. I'm like, dude, like I mean, yeah, that's great and all, but help me understand the economics of it.
well, it's not free. Someone's paying for
Oh,
it.
the other one was, fuck compromise, fuck compromise in the face, like you're a commie if you're a compromise. I'm like, whoa, when did it become bad to try to work with people? And they're like, the era of working with people is over with.
Our enemies must be crushed.
I
The
mean,
negotiations
literally.
have failed. Like what?
And so the thing I was kind of bringing up to him, I go, guys, help me understand, like, how do you even, so if I'm more left leaning, independent, so you're saying you don't even care about my vote. So how do you get enough votes? Where's the money come from for your campaigns? The grant, there is no cause and effect. I'm sitting there going, what is wrong? Is this more systemic? I'm literally freaking out now that we've raised a generation of kids who literally can't think. Maybe it's like a conspiracy theory or something. I don't know. And it really does scare, like, what the hell is going on in our K through 12? I know I have lots of clients who, either they're in education, they're teachers, and just hearing the stories because I work a lot with adolescents, and I got to get down to the bottom of this. So luckily, Holly, our lovely intern, who's like almost like play dates, like, hey, you do this, why don't you guys talk? And surprisingly, it actually worked with networking. I mean, it's once again, social media, it does it. So I want to welcome our guest. I'm super stoked. Kevin Stoller, you there, my man?
I am. How are you guys doing?
Dude, awesome. So Kevin's the founder of K through 12 or K to 12. It's educational consulting services, and it seems like your guys' whole MO is how do we create a better learning environment so kids can actually learn. I love it. It sounds like a great idea, and maybe I don't know. Is something? Am I? Bill always has to walk me off the plank, but is there something going on where are we really not teaching kids how to think anymore? Help me, man, make heads or tails of this.
Yeah, well, we can jump right in.
Let's just do it, man.
Yeah, it is really difficult. And just to give a little bit of where I'm coming from, I spend about half my time working with schools around the country. So I'm in there working with teachers, with principals, administrators, and seeing what's going on. But the other half of my time is really spent more in the entrepreneurial world with other business owners who are crazy like me, or what they think we can change the world.
You
And
actually
they
make a
just are
change.
trying to do it.
How dare you?
What is wrong with us? Like, why you want to do podcasting? I'm going to change the world, I'm going to be a
Yes.
change agent, What the fuck is wrong with us, man?
So when you mix those two worlds, it's really two worlds that don't always kind of intersect each other. And what I've seen is that the overriding thing is that it is not the school's fault. We as adults and as voters and as community members have put these chains on the schools to try to focus on goals that really don't matter. And what's exciting for me is that I've seen a lot of the things that are changing, and there's going to be a lot of things that are going to affect that. And to me, I used to always say, well, the problem is like college is a problem. Like it's all the K-12 education is focused to either get kids into college or for the kids that are going to go to college of getting them into a better college. And that's our fault as parents and as voters and everything to make that the goal of the K-12 education. And to me, that's where it all started. And I used to believe like, oh, that's the whole issue. That's the whole issue. And now I'm turning the corner and I'm realizing that it's really the adults that are screwing it up and the employers and the hiring managers that are doing it. So it really actually goes further up the chain.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to talk about and share with kind of what I've seen and what I think is going to happen to make that it's going to change really, really quickly, which most people in the education system don't think that's going to be the case
Yeah.
because they've been it's just been such a slow moving system in the past. But there are some things that I think are coming on the horizon here that are going to vastly change that
So, dude,
and really allow the teachers to really teach the way they want to teach
so,
and
so
be
help
able
me,
to,
yeah, help me understand,
yeah.
because like I was like, I did my research. I was like, hey, like I want to see hey, like what's going on with this, and I was looking at funding, and it was like, what was it? Since the Great Recession, 2008, every single state was slashing their school education budgets, and it doesn't seem like it's ever gone back to where it was pre 2008, and it stayed almost very stagnant. If anything, all I hear is a very public sentiment against, like, let's break up the public school, the Department of Public Education. So if anything, I hear a lot of, almost like disruption, or that people want to basically create to fix the education system. So what are you seeing coming down the pipe that I don't know if it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, this change you're talking about?
I think it's going to be good.
Yeah.
But first off, because we work in like in all the states, but I know some states more specifically than others. Every state is still very different, even though there's the federal education. You know, they really have zero. I mean, really, they have zero effect on what's going on at the state level, and then each state has it run differently. Where some states are very much where they are kind of dictating the standards, where other states are pushing it more to the districts, and the districts are allowed to kind of have a little bit more say of that. And then you throw in kind of the wrinkle of charter schools, and
So what
some
is a
states
charter
are,
school? Like what
yeah, well,
actually?
that's a good place to start
Yeah.
because and I should, coming from Ohio, because I was in Ohio for 20 years or so, the charter network is so different based on which state you're in. And every state that even where they have charter schools, and I guess that's the first thing to saying is charter schools are publicly funded schools. So, but each state kind of determines if they are going to allow charter schools
Hmm.
and if those charter schools are how they're going to be regulated and mandated. So, Ohio, for example, there are charter schools that are allowed, but only in the major metropolitan areas. So you'll see them in the Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton. You'll see them in those areas, but once you get into any of the suburban or the rural ones, they are not allowed in those areas. Other states, it will be blanket, wide open. You can have charter schools, and there's usually a board that kind of determines which ones are allowed to open to get funding, and they have to kind of meet requirements. So if you take that piece of it away, there's obviously a lot of political and like just a lot of debate about charter schools, whether they're good or bad. It's been interesting to see in some of the states that are more mature with charter schools that it's kind of playing out in a way where it's accepted that they're there and they're not going away, and it is kind of raising the game or at least challenging all the other public schools that are out there
Really?
because they are competing for each student because they the funding is tied to each student to how many they have.
How much of that is also a product of the teachers that they're getting? Because I have lots of clients. I'm a big advocate of like Teach for America, AmeriCorps,
Yeah.
because you get stipends for college. You can help pay off some of your loans. I see a lot of college grads coming from really good programs going off for Teach for America. It's good money. And so how much of that do you think it's just they're getting good quality teachers actually?
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say and again, depending on the states, it's so hard to make blanket statements about anything in education because it is so different no matter where you go. But in some states, there's such a demand for teachers that you can hire someone that may not necessarily have a teaching degree, and in
Hmm.
the public districts, they not only are going to have a teaching degree, but they may also need a master's degree
Yeah.
in there. So it's definitely, and a lot of that is the district may have the policy or the state may have the policy of saying that we need these sort of, these qualifications to become a teacher. It is interesting because when you get into in some of the charters, and again, there's really good charter schools and there's really bad charter schools, and it's hard to lump them all in together and say, and give a blanket statement to that. But because of that, you do see a wide variety, and you get to see almost, I call it kind of like the R&D environment of education.
Really? So
It's
they got a
really
lot more
given us,
freedom, like the kind of experiment with like,
exactly.
where,
They have
that's what
a
you do a
lot
lot.
more
Yeah.
freedom to decide what the curriculum is and focus. And you'll see some schools are focused, like more for student athletes, and some will be towards the arts, and some will have more of like a classical education program. So it's really interesting to see like all of these experiments and how they're playing out. And obviously when you experiment, there's gonna be some things that you learn that are gonna be really good. You want to take other places, and then there's gonna be things that fail, and you're like, don't ever do that again. But it's interesting to see that because these have been around for a while, and I'm in Arizona now, and which is one of the more mature charter school states.
Mm-hmm.
Now that it's been around for a while, it's a great place to look here and learn and try to figure out what worked and what didn't work, and can we take some of those best practices and apply them to other areas.
So what are you seeing, my man? Like, so what, give me some hope. Make me less pessimistic about our future.
Right.
So
Good luck
what,
there.
what do we got?
All right. Well, let me start
Debbie Downer
with
Divine over here.
let me start with, things are not going to change until we as adults that are not in the education system decide we want it to change.
I mean, we have to do something. I didn't think you were going to come on our show going, you have to do something.
All this is deciding, and all it is literally to say that college is not the only way that's right for the kids. And in most cases, it's probably the wrong thing for the kids. And as long as that conversation happens and more are doing it, and what's exciting to me is why I think it's going to happen really quick, is you're seeing what the topic is of, it's a national basically crisis of student debt right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also seeing kind of the scandals that you had earlier in 2019 of kind of celebrities paying to get things in it, and you're seeing the rising costs. You're seeing all these things that are coming into play that parents are starting to realize, like, maybe I either don't have the money to pay, or I don't want my kid to have that much debt. And the students also are starting to realize, like, you know what? This is kind of a freelance society that we're going into. Mm-hmm. Do I really want to do that? Or is the reality, I just want to be around other 18 to 22 year olds?
Yeah.
And
that whole emerging adulthood. Yeah.
Exactly.
What was the old T-shirt I saw back in the day? It was like, of course the cost has gone up now, but it was like, I used to laugh at it. It was like, college is what was it? It was college is a bar, one giant bar with a $50,000 cover charge or something like that. Now, of course, the price has gone way up since those days, but like,
I think it where I started seeing, I'm not sure, because my book Failure to Launch was solely I noticed it about 7 years ago, where it was just a lot of these 20-somethings that are either dropping out of school, they've graduated, don't have a job, moving back in with mom and dad. Now, given the 2008 crash obviously had something to do with that, but I started noticing where a lot of kids were, and parents were sitting there going, well, I don't understand it. Like I got great grades, I can't get a job. It's like, well, what kind of internships and jobs do you have? Well, my mom and dad just told me to work and don't worry about money. And I'm like, this is the problem we start getting into. It used to be you have a business degree from a decent school, maybe you get like a $30,000-$40,000 a year job, but the job was there. Now everyone goes, well, how is it an entry-level job and it says 1 to 2 years of experience? I'm like, that's why I've been telling you guys, you got to do internships the entire time. And so now all of a sudden college didn't become about the degree gets you a job. It's college then gives you access maybe to the internship network or the donor network that gives you an internship, then that gives you the experience that gets you in the lobby of maybe getting a job. And that's where I started noticing people starting to question the value basically of education. It seemed like it went from there. Is that kind of what you saw on your end?
For sure. Yeah. And then we're even seeing and I have a lot of the discussions with other employers and like other business owners and hiring managers. Like how many times are you taking, the job description and it says 4-year degree on there and that you're requiring that. And then if you have the discussion, be like, well, what if somebody was really good at that job, but they don't have a college degree? Would
Mm-hmm.
you hire them? And almost everyone said like, yeah, I
Yeah.
would hire them. And then if you really start thinking about like the ones that you really want are kind of the gritty ones who have had an alternate route versus just doing what they've all been told to do. And once that kind of turns and again, I'm not making the doctors, the lawyers, like there is going to be college. It's not like everyone
It's
is going to
it,
Oh,
get
it's
rid of
and
college.
yeah.
it's also too when it comes to college. I can tell you my old company that I worked for. All they would post all the jobs that would openings for jobs they would have, and they would all require a 4-year degree. But then like
Right.
and they would tell you that, oh yeah, you need to have a degree, or that you need to have whatever, a bachelor's or a 4-year degree or whatever. And then you would see people get the job who you would know personally who did not have a degree,
Yeah.
sometimes at all, but because they maybe had the experience in the company, or maybe the decision maker liked them on a personal basis. And I remember there was, some hurt feelings, within the company about that, because they'd be like, wait a minute, you just sat
Yeah.
here and told everybody that, hey, publicly, hey, you guys need to have a degree for this, that, and the other. And then you hire someone because that's kind of your not
Right.
your buddy, but you do like them. And you're like, well, what kind of message does that send to other people? Because you tell people, oh, you got to have a degree. Well, this person here has been promoted twice and he doesn't have a college degree,
Right.
period. So it's kind of like, well, so you're right. When you see that, you must have a 4-year degree. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's
But I
sometimes
think
who you know,
the
not what you know.
right, and we're
Hmm.
seeing kind of the public sentiment that like where it is kind of based more on your merits. And especially when we get in more like the freelance society, when you get into kind of like the Upworks and some of these things where, what I can see what you're outputting, what the work is that you're outputting, and I can hire people based on that. So it doesn't matter to me whether you spend 4 years, like doing, the curriculum, to get your bachelor's degree in whatever your major is. In some ways, we're seeing that actually is hurting people when they're doing that because now they're not getting those 4 years of their life to be able to really explore what their passions are
Yeah.
and,
It,
and set them up in that way.
chasing things for the wrong reasons, no intentionality behind it. Like, well, why'd you go to that school? Well, my legacy, my parents went there and my friends went there. It's like, do they even have the major that you want? Well, no. Why did you decide to, like, with me, I chose to go to Otterbein and I knew it was going to be more expensive, but I strategically weighed out, I think their psych program is so much better. It's going to give me the research experience that I know will help me get into grad school. And then my mindset was always, spend on, and this is a rule I teach my clients, spend on college what you think your salary is going to be. What's getting people into trouble is they don't either know what they want to do, they have a wrong idea of it, and so they're spending $80,000 or $100,000 on an education that never is going to pay them more than 50 grand a year.
Or then
Yeah.
they major in underwater basket weaving, and they don't understand. What do you mean I can't get a job and as an engineer? Like,
Yeah.
well,
Well, and this is where like kind of going right back to like the whole idea of like learning and what is the best environments and programs to help kids learn and think, because my dad called this up. My dad taught MBA classes. He's retired now, and he started noticing in MBA classes where he would like maybe pose a question where it'd be about rote memorization, like it could be like an economic principle, right? And but then when he'd ask him a synthesis question, what does this mean though? Apply this to that or change things up, they couldn't answer it. I hear that when you're mentioning, the people that are graduating and going into the workplace, when 49% of hires weren't working out and 93% of the time it had nothing to do with skill, which is the easiest thing to assess. Everyone starts going like, well, what are we missing? And you start getting an idea of like just how people think. A lot of times kids, all they thought about with high school and middle school was get the grade, get the grade. It doesn't matter. Everything is about the grade, but they didn't memorize it. And I know the system is technically designed to where it almost does reward or reinforce just memorization, but not synthesis.
Exactly.
See that as a giant problem, and employers mysteriously are kicking back on it. It's I had one guy. He was a, well, let's say that his name was maybe on a building of a business school, and he goes, "What the fuck am I giving them money for to give me the cream of the crop, and this is what they're giving me. What are you guys doing over there? Mysteriously, within the next year and a half, you look at their entry requirements for the MBA program down there. It was like, less about SAT, GREs. It was more about what have you done? Have you worked out into the real world? Demonstrated examples and successes, and so there is a shift. So, what are you guys learning in that K through 12 realm? That is there some evidence kind of pointing to my hypothesis that we have a thinking and rationalization problem?
Yeah, and again, this is where if we would kind of unshackle the teachers and the administrators, they know this. The research is out, and they know that the way we've been teaching for the last 120 years, because in the most ways it has not changed that much, is is that it was pretty much somebody's up in the front of the classroom, and it's very much that somebody is teaching, the other person is basically there to just suck in that information and repeat it back out to them. And that was considered what a good student is. And we know that from the research is that the stat came out a couple of years ago that 85% of students that were in kindergarten are going to be working in jobs that do not exist right now.
Hmm.
So we know that
Wow.
what we have to prepare the
That's
kids
wild if
for
you
That
think
is
is
about it.
wild.
not something that is even going to be existing.
Well, even with automation, I mean, look how many jobs are going to be gone within what they say 10, 15 years. That we have to create new job markets pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, and so really, if you talk to anyone in the education, they know they need the output needs to be people that can solve problems.
Yeah.
It's literally as simple as that. Is we need to create an environment where people are solving problems. The issue that's
Yeah.
still that out there is that we're still grading the schools and the students based on these tests and based on like how we need to make sure that the school is an an A-rated school or whatever the system is within each
Hmm.
state.
Teaching to the
And
test, I think a lot of times.
teaching to
Yeah.
the test and teaching and making sure that they're outputting those things, and still the output, the only way that you can really judge if a school is good or not is based on those stats of how well they perform on standardized tests and what colleges and what percentage of students get into college when they graduate.
So how do we
So the
change it?
whole system, is gearing for
Oh
for
man.
Yeah.
basically getting into college. So this is what I'm excited about. Is I
Yeah.
think it's going to change. Is the public sentiment is changing,
Yeah.
and we still need the help. We still need the parents to not have the stigma of saying like my kid is going into so and so college, and that's the pride of the parent. And once they realize that, you know what, college is not the goal.
Yeah.
Once, because if you go to any school anywhere in K-12 and you can look at their mission statements, it's all about creating learners and being able to prepare every individual student for their needs. But behind it all, the reality is that it's really college.
Yeah.
So if that goal of college changes, now we're able to free that up. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what it will look like,
Yeah.
because there are schools that are
I'm
doing
I'm
it.
dying because I'm trying to figure out like what does this actually look like, and then even taking
Yeah.
into account the environment that's preventing that it's preventing our teachers and administrators from maybe incorporating these changes.
Yeah, for sure. So the way it looks in the schools that I think are doing it right now, and it's interesting because we do a lot of work with also independent schools, which are essentially kind of like the high-end private schools.
Yeah.
These are the ones where they're expensive to go to. It's pretty much a given. Every one of these students, if they want to, are going to
Yeah.
be able to go to whatever college they want. So college is almost not the goal at
Hmm.
that point. It's the goal is more of like having a really good education
Hmm.
and preparing that. So, and again, I have to put my disclaimer: not every independent school is this way. There's still a
In
lot that
Texas,
take a lot of
everything was an
pride in
independent
where.
school district. Yeah, but I think I love your point though. Of when you take away the whole main goal of college and preparing for college, and when it's almost like a given because of their financial socioeconomic background, it's like, well, now how do we actually teach kids to learn better?
Right.
That's amazing. You
Yeah.
free that up.
Yeah. So what we've seen in a lot of those, and a lot of public schools, I mean, we're seeing the trend. We feel like it's a lot, but in reality, it's probably only about 10 to 20% of the schools right now are looking at the environments and saying, like, we don't just care about memorization anymore. So this is not about a teacher just getting in front of a classroom and kind of being the way they call it, the sage on the stage. It's more about having this shift of having more of the guide by their side,
Yeah.
and being the one that's really allowing them to interact and work on projects to problem solve. And this can happen literally, in pre-K and go all the way up through the school, through high school, and being able to not just worry about the memorization of things that literally they can either Google, and now with voice commands they can literally say, "Hey Siri, who was the president in 1909?" And so it's not a matter of you need to memorize that anymore, because that's a given for them. They now know how to get that information when they need it. But we're going to put them in situations where they are trying to solve hard problems and be able to drive it around their passions.
Hmm.
So we're seeing a lot of drive towards what's called project-based learning, or PBL
Yeah.
types of curriculum.
My daughter's school here in Olentangy, they're really big with that. And Bill, I'm sure Worthington will be like that too. Like, it's actually really cool. I'm really impressed by it.
Yeah, and one of those things, and and typically stuff like that, it's kind of hard to grade. It's a little bit more subjective
Yeah.
on there.
Well, it's
So
well, think about with kids think about reading. How many times have you heard the parent, "My kid can read," and it's like, no, their ass is just memorizing what's on the page. But when they ask a synthesis question, and so I know with my daughter's school, when we did our parent teacher conferences, that was one of the things they go, "Well, she's really good with blank, 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 and blank with the reading, but we need to work on her comprehension. That's is she synthesizing?" And they do it by asking questions and like, "What did you just read? What does it mean? How does it relate to what we've been talking about?" I'm like, yes, critical thinking, it does exist. Yes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's there, and the kids
Yeah.
want it, the teachers want it, everyone wants it. They all see it. There's a lot of research. Actually, Australia and New Zealand are kind of ahead of us
Hmm.
on a lot of this, and they've done a lot of research. So what that now turns in, and obviously what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, we're looking at, and my team is looking at the spaces and saying, okay, these big bulky desks, these things that have been in there for, in one form or another for over 100 years, and represented in pretty much every movie or TV show that you've ever seen of a classroom, where like they're all just sitting in straight rows with their head down and disengaged. um, we need to get those out of there.
Yeah.
If you look at those are almost like as harmful as cigarettes
Hmm.
are, where we know the research is that that's bad, because it's not allowing the kids to be engaged. It's not allowing them to really kind of own the space that's around them. So what we're doing is we're talking about, like, this needs to be out of there. We need to be looking at how do we create environments that are fostering the creativity and the collaboration to be able to allow these students to get better at problem solving.
So what are you guys doing differently? Because I mean, this data, a lot of it's been out there for a while. I mean, because if you look at the Japanese style of education, they're very much on not the right answer, but what was your they grade more about what was your process to come to the right answer. European model, you've seen it. The data is out there for so long. A lot of really cool private schools have been doing it. Why now? Like, why all of a sudden are people starting to listen at even at we'll just say that it seems like it trickles down. So where some of the nicer public school systems are now incorporating it. So what's changed where people are listening now to this?
Yeah, well, I think because the research is out there, is like when you look at it, like they know that every student has different learning styles, and it's not about necessarily the speed of how long like how quickly they can learn it. It's more about the idea of, can they master
Hmm.
those skill sets out there. So there's enough research that's been going on, and the schools are very much that they look at it and it's evidence based. So they don't make changes unless there is evidence there, and that's, to their credit. I'm not an academic. I would not survive well in that environment, but they really trust kind of the academic side of it, and looking at studies and validating it before they implement it. And that's where it's been nice to have some of, like the independent schools and the charter schools, some of these that are able to test some things out and be able to figure out if something's working better than others. One of the things that's coming out that I think we're going to start seeing more and more is having what's called more of a mastery transcript.
Hmm.
So instead of having kind of the GPA, like the normal GPA of based
Yeah.
on kind of how your test scores, it's more where they're looking at, um, has the student mastered these skill sets? And it may take, and it's not even a matter of how long they take it. So if somebody doesn't do well on a certain thing, they can redo it and keep working to demonstrate that they've mastered that skill. And I think as we move more and more towards that, it's going to be better for the kids because
Well, I guess
I don't know. How old are your kids?
my daughter is 5.5. Bill, how old are Max and Brody?
2 and 4.
Okay. So you got younger ones. I have some younger ones in there too, but I also have a couple older ones in there. And it is interesting to see that they get put in a track really early.
Yeah, they
and
do.
and it's kind of sad because most of them do catch up. And it's the ones that like that have a slower start, they have the ability to catch up, but now they're being labeled into a different track, and that really messes with them.
It really
And
does. I
it
mean,
really kind of establishes what they are really for the rest of their education career, and then obviously flows through into life after school.
because I do a lot of coaching with kids with ADD in college and in high school, and you get a lot of these kids where it's like, even when they start doing good, they almost don't trust that it's going to stick because they've so used to this stigma of there's something wrong with me, there's something, I'm not going to perform at this level, it's going to happen. It is fascinating that mentality. I mean, and that's why I always love where we put our daughter in Montessori school, because we love the fact of you're mixing kids of differing skill levels, and the whole idea is that everyone moves at a different pace, but they're all going to learn from each other, and everyone will move at their own rate. So if you want to keep rolling and moving fast, let them do that. But then also the ones that are moving along, they eventually will kind of get there, and it's really kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, there's two other things that I know I kind of gave you guys a time limit, but I want to make sure
Yeah,
make sure
please,
that I
yeah.
hit two other things for you in there.
Yeah.
One, you're right, and there's a book called The End of Average, which really demonstrates that really well. Is that this book was written and it started looking at Air Force pilots. They were doing a study in the Air Force of trying to make the cockpit designed so that every pilot would be able to reach everything in split second, because obviously it's life and death for that. And so what they did is they did a study and they measured 7 different components of all of their pilots. So they had over 2,000 pilots and they were measuring everything to try to get an average of what the average pilot would look like so they can design it for the cockpit. So at the end of the day, of the 2,000 pilots, guess how many of them fell within one standard deviation of all 7 of those
God, I'm gonna say like less than 4%, 3%, something like that.
Yeah, 0.
Yeah. It was so low because human factors was something like I love, and I remember hearing about that. It was like absurd. Like nobody can fit into
0.
that.
Nobody did. So when you're designing things towards the average, you're really designing it to no one. You literally are better off picking one pilot out of that and designing it to them, and you're gonna be better off. The good from things like that is that's what's turned into kind of every car that we have, where you have all the adjustable seats and adjustable steering wheels. That came from that type of study. And we're seeing it more in the medical field, where the same thing, like instead of looking at the average, we're looking at the individual. And that's really cool to see kind of the genetic studies and the things that are going on. But we're starting to see it in education too, where it's now more teaching towards that individual and being able to do it that way, versus saying, well, we care about the average student, and be like, no, we need to be caring about each individual, and because they all are going to learn differently. And that's what we're all about. It's we want to be like, well, let's create that environment where that student can kind of pick and choose where the best environment is for them, instead of forcing everyone to kind of be in this standardized environment.
So let me have a big question for you, and I know I'm going to be mindful of time. This will be my last question kind of for you, but we're going to have you on because like I didn't even get to the other things that I want to even get to, but this is so much more interesting, but I want to get back to this. We have to have you back on again, all right? But so all this sounds great because in Texas, where before I moved, the way that they had independent school districts, and the way it was kind of set up was that the wealthy went to the private schools. You had some decent, wealthier independent school districts within those cities, but most of them went private. And you had a lot of tiered education, especially for special needs like autism. That's going to be a giant thing. That's another thing didn't even get to, but it's all right. It's cool. So we see it to where it's like the wealthier private schools, as you said. Charter schools have been messing around with it. Some of the more higher, the public schools from the districts have a little more money. But the reality is that probably makes up maybe 10% of our school districts. How do we get this type of thinking across the masses, but also be mindful of the continually are cutting money to go, and a lot of that money, the little money they do get, is based upon this old testing system. So how do we break that cycle for the rest of the 90%, and get that
Yeah,
rolling?
and this is where I'm a little more encouraged than probably the average person out there. I am seeing some really amazing thing in kind of the, like the poor districts, and they'll call them kind of like the Title One schools.
Yeah.
These are the schools that had that. One, funding is actually, this is where actually the federal government is actually supporting a lot of those Title One schools and providing funding. So a lot of times we're not seeing is funding being so much the issue. It's obviously more of like trying to break that cycle that's out there. And again, this is why I feel like the focus on kind of the individual students' needs is when they start implementing a lot of these things, it helps them as well, because now you're looking at every student individually, looking at making sure that they're mastering these skill sets instead of kind of putting them into a track and being so worried about like what, in a lot of those cases, the ultimate goal is to get them to college. And again, not always the best thing on there. And it obviously drops off a lot of the ones that just never had any interest or never thought they would go there. And that was the only thing that's going to determine if they're a success or a failure, is whether they can get into college. And if we can really shift that, where the education system is not about preparing everyone for college, instead of just preparing them for life to every individual student's needs, we're going to see it. Because like that, not everyone needs to go to college, and it doesn't, obviously is not determined if their life is going to be successful or not.
I like he has hope. I like
There
that.
is hope
Usually,
there.
yeah, like
That's good.
usually I'm like, tell me doom and gloom, tell me we're fucked, tell me it's all gonna. But no, you're like, dude, I'm feeling good about it, and
Yeah.
I look at this as the foundation for how we unfuck our country. And you're saying, Mike, I think we're some
Yeah,
cause for hope, man.
there is. All right, so my last thing before I
Last
gotta
thing,
go.
all right.
Why what is going to change really quickly, and this is the piece to me of, I think it's going to happen really fast and it's going to change everything, is that there has to be some other thing other than college
Mm-hmm.
right now
Yeah.
to replace it. And there's got to be something that the parents don't have a stigma against, to feel like, like my kid is, like, I'm not disappointed in my kid. But if you think about it, kids, I know I was this way, and most people that we talk to, that they just want to be around other people their
Mm-hmm.
age.
Yeah.
And so obviously there is a big push to have, like, could there be public service or different things that can happen? But what I think is going to happen kind of naturally, just from just kind of the free market system, is that there's basically going to be college campuses that are going to pop up,
Mm-hmm.
or they might replace these private schools that are no longer going to be in business because the price tags are going to be too
Oh,
high.
they're already
But they're
pricing themselves out right now. Yeah.
right, and they're going to go live there. So instead of paying $50,000 to go to a school, it's going to cost $8,000 to $10,000 to live there. And they're going to be able to take online classes from schools anywhere around the world. They're going to have jobs. They're going to be able to do freelance work.
Yeah.
And it's almost like what we would have been seeing in the corporate world of kind of the WeWork, the co-working
Yeah. The co-hatch place.
locations,
Yeah.
of being able to have community. It's just giving them community. And I think,
Yeah.
like, if there is this kind of thing and be like, oh, they're going somewhere after college, and they're going to a campus or somewhere that isn't invented yet, but it's going to happen quick, of some location where, it's some type of co-living, co-learning type of situation where there's not a stigma to that, but it's still way less expensive. They're going to be able to work and get work experience while they take classes, for free around the world, and get certificate programs.
Yeah.
Because it's out there. I mean, the technology is out there. There's so much free courses.
And the more you see a lot of young people starting their own companies, they're very much incorporating that. And you nailed it, man. Like, I think this generation is searching a desperate need for community. And I think right now they're segmenting themselves off into these little hyper politicized, groups. And it's only like it's like all they're getting is one bit of information. But I think you're right. It's like, I love that idea of, hey, that community, and that's what they're looking for. I think the only thing we have to look at is what are going to be those jobs that they can get, because typically when we look at professional schools and training, a lot of the jobs that we would typically associate with that, 60% of them are probably not going to exist in maybe 15 years due to automation. So we really got to think about what is going to be the job market for them. That is those jobs, as you said, that don't even exist yet.
Right.
And that's going to be our dilemma. I think that's our challenge. I think as we start taking over this country, our age group, is we got to start thinking about that. And it's a place that we got to start thinking. I think the only problem we run into, and I'll kind of close you off on this one, and this is, of course, my pessimism, but, it's more about being realistic. What I think with the challenges that we have is like, so Mayor Pete, so he was giving his plan for college, and it was like, hey, if you want to go to college, you can. If you make under $100,000, we can get college paid for it for like, community college, state schools. You make over $100,000, it gets tiered down. And he's like, hey, I think that's what's going to be affordable. And that way, if you want to go, you can. But if you don't want to go to college, hey, we can come up with something else. People started crying. So what, you want to create a caste system now? So only these people go here. It's just like, oh my fucking God. It's like that even can't
please everybody.
You can't, that even can't get put into it. It's like, we're not fucking a caste system. What? But that's what you talk about, changing the minds of adults of, it's not a statusy thing. It's just, it's being realistic of where we're at.
But what people hear is, either half of you are going to go to college and the other half have to become cage fighters. Like, what? No, that's not what he said.
Gosh, it's great. But I like where your head is at. And I think there's some real optimism. There's some real change happening. And I think it's about time that we start talking about that. We have so many issues facing this country, and we should be talking about education. We should be talking about, hey, how do you solve crime? How do you solve, unemployment? How do you solve the substance? It's like, mysteriously, when you have a great quality education, that solves everything. But it takes putting the money up front and seeing it come to fruition later on. And I think we need more forward thinking. I'm really excited that the evidence is starting to get there where people are noticing and they can't, deny it anymore. And I like it's kind of like we buy a house and like, well, you can spend this amount, or this amount. And it's like, well, this amount, it's more expensive up front, but you're going to say it's going to pay for itself in 5 years, right? Well, just give me the cheap one, right? And it's like, no, wait a minute. Like, if it pays itself off in 5 years and we have black and white data, why not do it? I think it sounds like we're there now, aren't we? At least almost.
It's going to happen. And it's happening even though people don't realize it kind of at a national level. That these things are happening, and whether the government, whatever happens with the government happens with the government. The reality is people are making individual choices on this, and once that happens, it's just going to become mainstream, and
I love it.
It's going to happen a lot faster than we realize. And to your point of like the jobs that I don't think we need to be worrying about preparing them for those jobs. I think it's just naturally going to happen. It's what the kids are going to be gravitating to. And if we allow these systems to kind of work, that they're going to go and they're going to want to work on these types of things. So at the end of 4 years, instead of having a college degree, they're going to have 4 years possibly of freelance working experience on the actual things that they're going to be doing.
I've been screaming that of, we have so much infrastructure to build in this country. Develop training programs. Create like a community college-like system where they may not make as much as they'd go work for some private engineering firm, but go and train people so then help them be part of the system. You can pay them less anyway because they'll be getting service, but they're still making a good living wage. And we're training America's next workforce, and we're building our infrastructure. It makes too much sense. Thank God someone else as brilliant as is seeing the light too. It's amazing. It makes me feel like I'm not crazy. But I love how optimistic you are. We need to have more optimistic guests on the show, because instead of being angry towards the end, I actually feel pretty good. Like there might be hope.
You're pretty good.
I like it. This is like my therapy session. I dig it, man. So Kevin, like we got to have you back on, man, because like there's 101 different things I would love to kind of bring you in and talk about. Plus you're a fellow Buckeye, man. So we got to take care of each other in our podcasting airways, right?
That's right. Go Bucks. All
Uh,
right. Do you mind if I head out and go
yeah,
put
yeah.
kids
I
to
was gonna
bed?
say, any plugs? Where can people find you?
Yeah, the best way is our website. It's KAY-12 spelled out TWELVE.com. And we do a lot of free services for the schools. Obviously, we sell furniture, but our goal is to impact 10 million students' learning environments. We wrote a book. It, go to it and just ask for free. If you get in a live chat, like we'll give you the book for free. This isn't about making money. This is about really impacting the students' learning environments, and in turn the teaching learning and the teaching environment as well. So, but that's the best place to start, and we can help guide through that. And a lot of times, even though we say we sell furniture, it it's not about money. You don't need to buy
You
anything.
sell
It's
hope,
just
my man. You sell hope. You sell the future.
so yeah. And then personally, my own pretty much I don't do a lot of social media, but LinkedIn is the place. So just search Kevin Stoller on LinkedIn, and yeah, connect with me. I appreciate it.
Awesome, my man. Thanks so much for being on the air,
All
my
right.
man. All right, you take it easy. All
All
right.
right. Go Bucks.
Go
All right.
Bucks.
Take care.
Later. All right. So, Bill, we actually got some hope here, man.
Up with hope, down with
Up
dope.
with hope, down with dope. The thing is, it is interesting. Like, I think, it's funny when you talk with people outside the Beltway, that are actually just out there working and doing their job. And it's amazing how you hear so many different answers. And because that's the one, like I always say, the most frustrating thing I ever found about the show was the whole idea was like, hey, let's not get experts who say they're an expert and get them on the air and talking about it. Let's get people actually doing it. Well, surprise, surprise, people actually out there doing it are afraid to come on the air and talk about these things. And so that's why it's always really neat when you get, someone like Kevin talking about, hey, education, what's wrong, what needs to be happening, what's going on, optimism. And it's like you get a different side of the story, which I dig, and
Absolutely.
and I love it, man. And I think education is something that this should be one of the number one issues, and I don't think anyone really talks about it.
If you don't get educated, I mean, if you don't, you're going to end up living in like District 12 or something.
I
mean,
know.
It's going to be, give it a couple more elections, and I mean, you see all the crazy candidates, and I'm not just talking Trump, but some people have some pretty radical ideas, whether you're for that or against it, and all it's going to take is a few elections away from, and I don't think we'll do that, but just the thought that, hey, whether you believe that or not, I just, whatever your beliefs are, it's just, I don't know, maybe because you and I are kind of more down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So when we see these extremes to the right and extremes to the left, I just kind of go, man, especially when I think of education, it's like, who's educating our children in what environment?
Yeah.
How much is it going to cost? Like all of that, everything together just kind of.
And that's where I think what Kevin was kind of saying is that now the research is out there going, if you make these changes and invest in it, you'll see the results. And now we have the data to back it up, and you can't deny it. And I think that is always a game changer, I think, when you have that in hand.
Sure.
But I mean, you can't get more important than educating our kids. I mean, look at our rising drug problem, the bullying, suicide, depression, the cost of, I mean, all of this, it's like, the one thing that everything has in common is our education system and how we educate kids, how we teach them to think, how we teach them to understand the world. It's not a wonder that we have a generation of kids that just don't quite know how to do reality testing, research design, and it's just.
Well, when you real quick, when you said drugs, I think one of the problems with the education on drugs is we were raised with the just say no generation, which is good on the surface. But now I think it needs to go deeper than that when it comes to, because of the opioid crisis and drugs in general. And I don't know, they need to dig deeper. The schools do, and it's not their fault, but I think it kind of starts with them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Instead of just having drug awareness program, I think they need to have drug awareness month, or really dive in, really show, like, I don't care. Take them to an abandoned crack house. I'm not kidding. Like, show them how people live.
Yeah.
You watch movies, and the movies kind of glamorize doing drugs and this, that, and the other. They don't actually really show you what will happen. Things like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, and we'll close things off, but it is actually a good point of, they're always trying to figure out, like, with kids and how they think and what stops behavior, what motivates behavior. And what was interesting is that what everything boils down to is, for a teenager, the higher the perceived risk of doing something, the less likely they're going to do it. But therein lies the simplicity of how do you stop kids from doing things they shouldn't be doing, or how do you reinforce things? But then lies in the very difficult crux of how many times a kid. Well, it's not going to happen to me. That's not going to be me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm different. Or there's an angle.
We've
or
talked about that before here. Yeah, it's
yeah.
Why do people smoke? Well, I'm not going to get cancer.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen to me.
It's exactly.
Otherwise, you wouldn't even, no one would ever even touch the stuff.
Yeah.
Any kind of tobacco, but it's not going to happen to me. Or they start when they're 16 or 18 or 20, and they're like, oh, that's 60 years away, 50 years away, and
yeah, it's
it is what it is.
It is what it is, man. But apparently, if we listen to what Kevin's saying, maybe in 15 years, kids will have a whole batch of kids that can think. So 15 years now, if we're still on the air, instead of getting kids that piss me off, that have no understanding of cause and effect, they're gonna go, actually, not that I agree with you or disagree with you, but here's my points and here's my evidence, and this is why I think it would work. All right, right on, cool. I can't wait for that day. I think it'd be awesome. There's a lot to that. So, but yeah, for once, I'm not angry.
Well, in that
first
case,
first time in 62 episodes. Mike's not.
Well, I'll tell you what. Then if we got 15 years ago, then I'll just see you in 15 years. I don't even need to be here. I don't even.
Dude, you really leave me to my own devices?
Maybe that guy can be the co-host.
Well, that's what happened to my last co-host. You can still see he's a little bit suppressed.
That's what drugs do to you. Son of a bitch.
All right. We ready to get out of here?
I'm ready.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's do this shit. Well, everyone, my name's Michael Devine. You've been listening to Gray Matters Radio on the 614 Radio Network.
All day.
I am, America's Counselor. My co-host, Bill Reed, Armchair QB. Find him on the Armchair Quarterback podcast.
I am Ukraine's counselor, or Russia, depending on who's paying me more. And everyone's flipping sides.
You're not supposed to.
One day the Ukraine's the bad guy. The next day it's Russia. Then they're against each other, and I'm confused.
In a totally unrelated matter, 614 Radio Network is now under federal investigation for espionage. And so thanks, Bill.
Just for the record, Russia, Ukraine, China, North Korea, I can be bought. I don't have any state secrets, so I can't really have access to that. But I'll give you something if the price is right. I mean, I don't know if that's right to say. I am for sale. I know. I love America.
I should have just cut your microphone off.
You should probably edit that.
Yeah, it's okay though. So on that, everyone, if
or if the CIA wants to recruit me for a really cold job, I'm an equal opportunity employer, employee.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
So apparently, the next time Russia or Ukraine asks you a comrade,
live via satellite from the Colombian prison, Bill Reed.
Democrats or Republicans ask you if you read your political say. Wow. Sorry, Boris. Fuck that noise. My ass is gray. All right, everyone. You be good to each other. We will see you next week, as always. You be good to each other. Peace.
Well, you know another thing I want to